So the first thing that we want to do for our beautiful acoustic guitar set is obviously work on our glass. Now, if you are doing this on a stainless steel tumbler, the process is almost exactly the same, except obviously I have taped off the top of my glass here because I don't like my designs going all the way to the rim. And when you're working with your SVG for the actual guitar face, obviously you're going to have to redo your measurements to make sure that the guitar stretches the length of whatever size tumbler you are using. But apart from that, the process is exactly the same. Okay, so I have started, this is just a beer glass. It's got, doesn't have it on the bottom, it's a 425 mil. Obviously being Australian, we work in the metric system. And not so much ounces. So this is what I say, 425 mil beer glass. I have spray paint, I've prepped it, which means that I washed it. I don't sand my glasses, but I did give this a really good wash, let it dry, and then I have base sprayed it white. I'm sorry that my camera keeps focusing, guys. So straight onto that without doing any epoxy or anything over the top, I'm going to go ahead and start my wood grain. Now for my guitars, I only ever use 2 different inks depending on whether they want a light grain or a dark grained acoustic guitar. For this, we're doing the light grain, which is the Ginger by Tim Holtz. If they wanted a dark one, I'd be using teakwood. Okay, but they are my 2 favorite inks to do wood grains with. I also like using caramel. Espresso I try to avoid where I can, but I have done wood grains with espresso a couple of times before. I think that's it. Just looking over. Oh, and sepia. Sepia I've used a couple of times as well, but my most popular ones are ginger and teakwood. Okay, so you'll need your brown alcohol ink. You'll also need the oldest, most dodgiest paintbrush you can find in your collection. The scratchier the better. Okay, so for my wood grains, I do a really easy wood grain. It's still super effective, but I try not to mess around with trying to get knots and whatever else too much. I actually cheat in regards to my wood grains, and if they do want knots in the wood, I print my knots onto water slide and apply them that way. It's just a little tip. But we're going to do one straight line down the glass, and then with my shitty crappy old paintbrush, I'm just going to go backwards and forwards. Okay, I'm actually hoping that I have enough ginger left to do this project because I'm running a little bit low and I'm still waiting on my order to come in with all of my new inks. We're going to cross our fingers. Okay, and that just that backwards and forwards motion, you will start to see that? Your wood grain effect. It is the simplest but most effective wood grain method. Now I've actually already done this particular technique in a full video dedicated to wood grain. It's about to pop up at the top of your screen now. I go through obviously this process, but also how to make two-toned wood grain peekaboos. So if you're looking for a little bit more information on how to achieve a really easy wood grain look, definitely recommend you check out that video. But today I'm not going to get too much into it because I've already done it a fair few times, but it really is just making sure that your brush goes from top to bottom and back again in that really swift even motion. And you start to get, you can see you start to get spots that naturally build up a little bit darker anyway. Okay, and this is going to be the base of our acoustic guitar. This is why having the scratchy paintbrush comes in handy, because the scratchier it is, the more texture that you get when you are running the paintbrush up and down. But that is how I get my super easy wood grain. So I'm going to go ahead now and speed this next bit up, and then I'll be back to chat. Okay, so that is, I'll move that down so I can get it all in frame. My super simple, super quick guitar base with the wood grain. Now you can see as I bring it around what I mentioned about some spots, there's one there, some spots just naturally build up a little bit darker as you're going back and forth, and some spots are a little bit lighter, and that's what creates the texture. So if they really want, I mean, if you've been doing wood grains for a while and you're ace at them, well, hats off to you, because I could never get the really fancy intricate wood grains that a lot of people do. But I have been doing cups for almost 3 years now, and I float quite well by just doing my wood grains this way. And if they do request that not to be put into the wood, as I mentioned, I just print them onto water slide and add them that way and cheat. Okay, but to do the bottom here, we're just going to move this up a little bit. Don't mind my coffee in the background, guys. I just do a little swirl, and then I work that ink backwards and forwards over the entire base. Okay, trying not to come up over. And that's your base. Okay, now as you can see, because I didn't epoxy this before doing the wood grain, my marks for my glass is still visible. Now these beer glasses are the only glasses where I actually have the watermarks in the bottom. Obviously when I'm doing designs like ink swirls or glitter glasses or anything like that, you don't see that. It's only ever on my wood grains that you can see this, but I don't actually mind, because it's got the instructions to not put them in the dishwasher, which they shouldn't be doing anyway, written on there. It also shows you the size, but it also shows you that this was once just a standard beer glass that I have done up myself. So that's really personal preference. If you buy glasses and you are going to be working with glassware and you do have the imprints on the bottom and you don't like them, I would highly recommend base spraying, doing a coat of epoxy, and then spraying again before you do your wood grain, just to cover up that imprint. But I don't actually mind it. The beer glasses that I was using before this brand didn't have it. When I got this, I didn't really mind. I really don't care, but that's just personal preference. I have never had anybody complain yet. I'm sure one day somebody will, but so far I've flown. Like, I haven't had any complaints. But that is the base coat for our acoustic guitar. So I'm going to let this dry for 24 hours. Once it dries for 24 hours, I will then give it 2 coats of spray seal, and then we will be back. Alright guys, so here is our glass. I let her dry for 24 hours, and after that I spray sealed it with 2 coats. I left each coat to dry for a couple of hours before doing the next coat, and then from there it's been drying about, say, almost 7 hours. So we are well and truly dry, and we are ready for the next step. Now the next step is that we put resin on it. I am using Just Resin's diamond coat at the moment. It is a 1:1 ratio food safe coating resin. I will leave the link in the description below where you can purchase that. But because this is the first time in this tutorial that we are using resin, I'm just going to slip my little safety disclaimer in here, and then we'll be back. Hi guys, a quick safety disclaimer for when working with resin. Please make sure you always protect yourself by wearing eye goggles or other protective eyewear, a half-face respirator mask with interchangeable filters. I got mine from Bunnings, and they also sell the replacement filters. And of course, gloves. Now I prefer to work with nitrile gloves, but in a pinch, vinyl gloves will also work. These are the 2 types that will not tear easily when working with resin. Please make sure you stay safe while you're having fun, and happy creating. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can craft. Now, as I mentioned, I am using diamond coat from Just Resin because we're only putting a thin layer on, because if we go ahead and put our vinyl straight over the alcohol ink, A, the transfer tape can lift up the alcohol ink. B, if I make a boo-boo, I'm going to have to restart the glass entirely instead of just lifting up the vinyl. So we are going to put a thin coat of resin on here. I mixed up 10 mils for this project, which is 5 mils of part A and 5 mils of part B. We're just going to put a nice, I wouldn't say a thick coat, but definitely a thicker coat than a hang method. Being the first coat of resin, I do want it a little bit thicker, even though we're not using glitter. It doesn't have to be super thick, but I do want it thick enough that we're not going to get any problems in case we do have problems with the vinyl. Okay, we want that nice and thick. So make sure you do your bottom as well. As you can see, my ink isn't going green or anything like that because it's well sealed. Now I do want to mention, I did mention when we were doing the wood grains, but I want to mention it again just for anybody that might panic. When you're doing wood grains, especially brown wood grains, when you go to spray seal, brown inks are notorious for going a little bit green. Now if you're paying attention around the top of the tape here, I'm not sure if it'll come up on camera, there is a green tinge to some of the overspray. Okay, my cup in some places did go a little bit green. Please don't panic. 9 times out of 10, as the spray sealant dries, it will go back to brown. Obviously you can see that this is now brown. I'm just going to move you guys that way ever so slightly so we're in frame. There we go. This had a green tinge over all of it. As you can see now though, it's definitely gone back to brown. 9 times out of 10 it will. If 2 hours after you've spray sealed, you find that it's still green, it's not going to change. The only reason that that happens is that you've put too much spray seal on in one go. When doing wood grains, that's why we do 2 coats. Even though I use Rust-Oleum 2 times, even though it's a 2 times spray paint or clear acrylic spray, I still do 2 really thin coats, make sure that my coverage is even, and I've only ever had, I think maybe 2 or 3 tumblers go green that haven't gone back, and every time it's because I've been real heavy-handed with my spray sealant. The one that is most notorious for doing it is the teak wood. Okay, because it is so dark. I think I've had trouble with the espresso in the past as well, but that's always gone back. But every time that I've had an issue where it's gone green and not gone back, it's because I've been using teak wood. So if you are starting out with wood grain, I would definitely recommend you leave the darker tones until you're a little bit more confident. Focus on doing your gingers and your caramels and stuff like that. But yeah, I just want to put that in there just in case you go to attempt this project and it goes a little bit Kermit the Frog on you. That's fine. It is a common thing to happen, but if after a couple of hours it hasn't gone back yet, then it's not going to change at all. Okay, so we've got a nice thick coat on this now. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with my heat gun, and then we're going to let it cure. Oh, that's a long way down some days. Just going to get all these little bubbles out, all the little surface bubbles. And because it's coming into winter now, it's getting cooler. This just helps the resin to level out a little bit easier as well, because it is a little bit cold. During the winter months, some of you may be coming into the cooler months for the first time as a resin artist. Not so much if you're over in America and places like that. You lucky buggers are coming into spring. But it is... Sorry, got sidetracked because I was just looking at the reflection, making sure there's no more bubbles. If it is your first like cooler weather period for being a resin artist, I would highly recommend you get a little space heater where you work. If you can't do that, at least get a little fan heater. You can get them from Kmart, you can get them from op shops, right? Just a little desk heater that you can sit your bottles of epoxy in front of for maybe 5 minutes before you go to pour. Especially with part A, it's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier. But I do recommend, depending on your power bill and your budget, if you can run a space heater while you're working, definitely do that. Otherwise, a little desk heater just to put your resin in front of is all that you need as well. But coming into the cooler months, you're going to find sometimes part A crystallizes a little bit. Putting it in front of a heater will fix that. Please don't put it too close to a heater, and never ever put epoxy near an open flame. I'm talking about like fan heaters. And I stand mine about 20 or 30 centimeters away from the heater itself. But you are going to find that adding heat to it is going to help it level out a lot easier as well. The cooler the weather gets, the harder it is to work with epoxy, but there are ways around that. Again, if you ever have any problems, I'm always available. A lot of you know me on Facebook now. Otherwise, just drop a comment. And I will come back and reply to you guys. But that is our coat of epoxy now. I'm going to let her turn and spin and cure, and then we'll be back to put the guitar face on. Alright guys, so moving on to our vinyl design and our SVG. This is our guitar face. But first things first, as always, I am a silhouette user, guys. I'm just going to minimize this because I realized last time you can't actually see the top band with my overlay. So I am using Silhouette Studio. I am using the designer edition. So I can import SVGs into mine. If you are using the basic version of Silhouette Studio, I would definitely recommend looking into upgrading to the designer edition if you can, simply because you can import SVGs. But when you do buy this file that I'm about to show you, it comes with a DXF file as well. If you are using the basic edition of Silhouette Studio, that is the version, like the file version, that you need to import, as you will not be able to import SVGs. Okay, so just moving on from that, this is the guitar SVG that I am using. It is from the wonderful Creative Fabrica. I actually do have an ongoing subscription with them. When I say ongoing, I mean I took advantage of one of their pay $1 for a month deals once upon a time. And I just keep reactivating my subscription. Every time I've got a couple of dollars in my wallet, I can afford that month for the subscription. I then max out as much as I can in that month, and then I, unfortunately, because I can't afford to pay for it every month, it will lapse again until I reactivate it. But I definitely do recommend looking into, if you can afford it once, or if you can afford it ongoing, looking into getting the unlimited access, because it really is unlimited access. They also have, every now and then, they have a deal where you can pay $1 for the whole month. If you're not yet a subscriber, I definitely hold off for when they have those deals, because what you can get for $1, man, do you get bang for your buck. Right, that is how I started with Creative Fabrica. A dear friend of mine, Jackie, who was actually a coach of mine, a small business coach, she put me onto Creative Fabrica because she actually uses the subscription, and from there I fell in love. So I will put this link down in the description, but this is the SVG file. As you can see, if you're buying it just as a one-off, it's not overly expensive. Okay, so that is our file. Once you've bought and downloaded your file, you end up with this here. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Now, you'll see when I go to put it on the cup, I've already I use this all the time for my guitar orders, right? So I've already color coded. If you can see, my strings are a light gray, then we've got black and white. Okay, when I put it together, I actually use black and white gloss vinyl and a silver metallic vinyl for the strings, just because I think it brings it all together and it looks really good. But you can use whatever colors you like. Now we're going to right click and ungroup the SVG. I've already color coded mine. but this will all come as black and white pieces. Okay, sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're going to group that again. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is measure from the very top of your glass or your tumbler all the way down, and this should sit about 1/4 of an inch above the bottom. You don't want this bit sitting right on the very bottom edge of the cup. It'll just look weird. So make sure you measure from the very top of your glass or your cup down to about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. I've already resized this. My most popular style for these glasses are on the big glasses that we're working on. So this has already been resized. When you are resizing though, this should actually be 5.5. I'm not sure where this little 1.3 came from. But when you resize, you come over to the side here, transform panel. We want to go scale. I'll just move this over in case my little panda's in the way. Scale, right? And where you've got your width and your height, please, before you do any resizing, make sure you lock the aspect ratio. That should be 5.5. Okay, not that it makes much difference, but it annoys me. Okay, so I know that mine's going to be 3 inches across by 5.5 inches high. If you don't lock the ratio, hang on, I'm just going to undo that. If you don't lock the ratio and you decide that you need yours at a height of say 10 inches, right, it's not going to pull the width with it, and it's going to end up looking really funny. So that's why we make sure our aspect ratio is locked. Make sure you only change the height because you're worried about the height from the strings to the bottom of the guitar, and as long as it's locked, the width will follow. Okay. Once you've resized your project to the size that you need it to be, you need to cut your vinyl. Now, as I mentioned, I do black, white, and silver. So my silver is my strings. I'm going to have this like over this side of the mat, and I know that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 2, right? So my vinyl I will cut at 6 by 2, right? We then have our white spaces, so that'll fit in about a 2 by 2 square, but when you go and add this, okay, so I know that I now need a 3 by 2 square of white vinyl, and obviously your guitar face as well, and I think that comes in at 3.5 by 5. Let's test that theory. Yeah, 3.5 by 5. Okay, so once you have it all set up on your mat like this, okay, you can go ahead and cut. Now, me personally, I like to cut all of my vinyl for a project at one time, so I will literally have squares of white, black, and silver all on my same mat as I feed it through. I actually didn't know that you could do that. I was using my silhouette machine for a good 12 months before I realized that you could actually do more than one color at a time. It's life-changing. So I will go ahead and cut this, and then we will be back and we will be able to put our guitar together. Alright, so once you cut all of your vinyl, you're ready to put it on. Now, whoops. It took me ages to get this in frame. Okay, please don't mind the pugs in the background. I'm actually in the middle of working on an order. I went to pack them up. They've got tacket on them. And I went to pack them up and realized that I've got no flat surface big enough to put them all without stacking them. So they're joining us for this part of the tutorial. But once you've cut your vinyl, okay, so there is, hang on, I'm gonna just remove that light so it focuses. I do my strings, as I mentioned, I do my strings in a silver metallic, and then we've got our guitar face with our black pieces, and then our 2 white pieces as well. Now, as I also mentioned, I'll show you, my strings go from top to bottom, okay, and my strings actually hang over the edge. I like them to be a little bit longer than too short, because then you'll see I come along with my craft knife and slice them to where they need to be. So this has already got its coat of epoxy that we did on it. As you can see, I have removed the top tape for now. And I've been letting this sit for about 2 days. It's been almost 48 hours between filming when we did our coat of epoxy to now. Okay, so I start with my, like the bottom bit where the strings feed through, and I might just have to turn it, move this little guy out of the way, just so you guys can see, but I can kind of see as well. And I want to put this right across the bottom, like that. Okay, once my bottom feed, we're going to call it the feed, is on, we're going to come through with, remember that white bit that has the, I know you can't see it, usually I use Metamark M7, but for little projects like this where it's just little cut jobs, I try to use up my offcuts, and this is Cricut, so it's white on a white base, so you can't see. I'll peel it off. Okay, now we can see, right? It's our line and our dot piece. Hang on guys, I can't remember if the dots go down the above the line or below the line. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna bring up the photo of the last one that I made. I'll hold it up for you guys to see as well. Hang on. This is why I keep photos of everything I've ever made. Alright, see? Nope, you can't see because the brightness is too high. Hang on, right down. I'll turn it right down. Okay, so there's the guitars that I've made once before. And the line goes above. I should know this because I used to play guitar, but it's different when you're being recorded. Okay, so we want them just sit about there. There we go. I feel like it's too far that way. I do. I feel like it's too far that way. So we're going to finish, and if it all comes together and it looks like I have made a mistake, I'll redo it. That's going to bug me now. I'll probably wake up tomorrow, and I always do it to myself. I'll wake up tomorrow and realise that no, I had it where it needed to be. Okay, so obviously the front face of our guitar, we want, whoops, this black circle, on screen Laura, this black circle to line up with this here, okay, because that's where our strings are going to go down. So that's about, sorry guys, I can't do this on an angle, otherwise nothing's going to be straight, and I've got to remember that I've got my little thing of tacket underneath just to hold it. The glasses are just a little bit too skinny and they fall through, so I always have something underneath it now. About there. I don't think it's off center. See, that looks... I think it's just me panicking because I know that I've only got one shot of filming this. Alright, there we go. So, I can turn this back around now. The front face, whoop, the front face is on. Sorry little puggies, you're getting pushed around a bit. Alright, so once your front face is on, we want to get the white circle that we cut. Line it up. Like so. You don't have to use white. I use white because I like how it looks. You could use silver to match the strings. You could use hot pink. I mean, you just go for it. Be creative. But I do. I use black, white, and silver for my guitars. And then our black circle goes straight over the top. I suppose if you wanted to, and you're going to see when we do the pen after this, I use a water slide for the pen. If you wanted to make life a little bit easier for you, you could just use the black water slide over the wood grain, and that would work just as well. I just like the effect of the layering. Okay, so now we've got our guitar face. We want to add our strings. Now, because this is a beer glass, it tapers in slightly and comes back out. So I always make sure that I position my strings, peel off the vinyl, and then come through with my craft knife and straighten out my strings so that they go into the holes, right? Just a side note, if you're doing it on something like a 30 ounce fatty or a 20 ounce skinny or something, obviously anything that doesn't have a taper, you can just slap straight on. But because this does taper, and I've done these a few times, I've learnt if I can get them to stick sort of so that they line up. Like, move this up ever so slightly. Sorry for my hand, guys. There we go. I'm going to push that down at the top. Enough so that once it's on, alright, I'll move you back down, turn this off again now. I want to push about 1/3 of the way down. Again, if you're using a skinny or something, you don't have to worry so much. But once I have my 1/3 down that I know is going to stay stuck, from the top, I peel down, right? And now, I'm getting very close to where I need to clean my craft room now, because I can't find anything on my desk next to me. Right, we're going to get our little craft knife. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to turn it this way, but I will show you what I'm doing with each string. We're going to start with this string here, which, depending on what way you hold your guitar, is your 6th string. And from where it's already stuck down, I'm just going to guide it down so that it lines up with that bottom white hole, right? It doesn't have to be directly in the middle, just as long as it looks like it's feeding through. Okay, so that's one. This next one is pretty much where it needs to be. 3rd string needs a little bit of encouragement. 4th string is doing its own thing at the moment, but we can fix that. Okay, so 5th string wants to be on the 6th, or the 2nd string, sorry, wants to be on the first hole. So we'll straighten him up, and then that only leaves I just got this tiny little air bubble, so I'm going to pop that now. Push it all down, and that is what we are left with. Ta-da! So it does take a little bit of work, but as you can see, it is well worth it. Now you can see our strings are hanging off down the bottom. Okay, I can turn it this way for that. I get my craft knife, making sure that you use the blade so that it presses flat, right? You don't want to slice, you want to press, because if you slice, you're going to end up slicing everything, right? So I'm going to go and press that down like that and pull that off. Okay, just a little haircut. Anna's messaging me. Everybody say hi, Anna. I'll call her when I'm doing my pugs, because they're the next job. They need to have orange mica powder put on them so they look like a rainbow pug, and then I've got to do glitter and epoxy over that because we're turning them into magnets for a breeder friend that I know. So I'm going to put them, mica powder will go on them when I'm finished with you guys tonight, and then I won't have sticky dogs all over my table, and I'll have a bit more room to work. But wait for it to focus. Now it's had a string haircut. That, if I move this out of the way, I can lean it down a bit more. That is the front face of my guitar. Ta-da! And I'm going to leave it like that. It is, see, it is from the gap to the side there to the gap to the side there. It's not in the middle, but I think the way that the guitar sits, I'm not going to bother changing that. It's not off center enough that anybody's going to notice once the design's all together. But yes, usually, and I do it by eye, but obviously looking at a cup this way is a lot easier than looking at a cup from this angle. But usually the dots and the line have to be in the middle of this black bit. But otherwise, that is how you put the front face on your guitar. Now this is ready for its final coat. Usually if this was for an order that wanted customization, I would go and put whatever on the other side, like that picture that I showed you. I put their name and then I put established whatever year underneath is the most popular design for me. But because this is for a tutorial and isn't for anybody, that is now ready for epoxy. So I'm going to leave this sit until the morning now, just to give that vinyl time to adhere, and then we'll be back to put the final coat on. Okay guys, here we go with the final coat. Now I am using again my diamond coat from Just Resin. I've probably mixed up way too much, but that's because I have a key ring to make afterwards. But I did mix up 20 mils, which is 10 mil of part A and 10 mil of part B. The vinyl has been sitting for about 24 hours now, so I know that it is well adhered. Whoops. So I'm going to put, oh, and I've also taped off around the top, if you can see. So when I do my first lot of epoxy after it's been spray painted, we've done the wood grain, obviously once that has cured enough where I can take the tape off, I'll take the tape off. I'll do all of my vinyl work and everything. As you saw, it had no tape around the top. And then when I'm doing my final coat, I'm not sure if it'll pick up. See how there's like maybe not even a 1/4 of an inch gap between where the wood grain is and where the tape starts? It's because when I go to put my final coat of epoxy on, that is going, like epoxy is going to fill, obviously, that gap there. And it gives me a nice little rim, like a good solid seal, so that I know that when they go to wash the glass or anything, nothing's going to get up under the spray paint that we sprayed the glass with, and just ensures that it has a really good waterproof coating essentially on it. So when you're doing glasses, I know a lot of people do tape up to the top. It's personal preference. I have opinions on it that I'm not going to share on my YouTube channel because I try to keep out of debates like that, but I personally don't epoxy all the way to the lip of the glass. I always use my tape to tape off, and you'll see that when this stops spinning in the final shoot, you'll see that the tape's off again and it has a really nice rim around it. So I'm just working the epoxy, especially between the strings, like that. It's starting to get colder at night, guys. It's starting to get a little bit harder to work. So I'm just going to drop a little bit more epoxy on it just to give it a really nice final coat, or what we hope is a final coat. There we go. I'll grab my heat gun. You've moved. There we go. We'll hit it with heat. Alright, the heat gun just helps it, because it's a little bit cold, just thins out the resin a little bit so that it moves around the cup and levels out a little bit easier. It's also popping any tiny little micro bubbles that may be left in the resin. So we want that really nice glassy finish. Oops. There we go. So I'll let this spin for about 45 minutes and then I'll take the tape off and I'll let it spin for the rest of the night. Alright guys, so on to the acoustic guitar pen, right? If you haven't already seen my video where I do of my pen tutorial, it's about to pop up the top now, but in that video I go through the stages of preparation. I do 4 different designs and then I discuss 2 options of packaging. I'm not going to go through the preparation or anything in this video. If you'd like to see how to prep your pens ready for doing resin art, make sure you check out that video. But I've obviously prepped my pen. Well, my phone's buzzing away in the background, sorry guys. I've prepped my pen. Okay, so I went through the whole process. I've base sprayed it white, but we don't want to do this process the same way that we did the glass for one very, very obvious reason, and that is I use the Papermate Inkjoy pens. If I bring this up and focus this, give it a second guys, I'm hoping, well, wrong direction. There we go, finally. Okay, see those divots? Right, those divots are from the grip. They go the whole way around the pen, right? Obviously, if we were to do wood grain straight over the top of this, we'd be able to see those divots in the wood grain. So my way around that is prepping the pen, base spraying it white. I'm now going to do a coat of epoxy straight over that white base. I'm going to let it cure And then once that's cured, that's then going to fill in these little divots. Depending on how thin you do your coats, you may need to do it a couple of times. So we shall see. I've done guitar pens twice already. The first time I did my coats really thin like you would normally on a pen, and I ended up having to do a second coat. The second time I made it ever so slightly thicker, not so thick that it's going to be dripping off onto the paper underneath. If your epoxy is dripping off your pen, you are using far too much and you're going to end up with problems. The main one being that the pens actually wobble ever so slightly as they're rotating, and you're going to end up with waves, bumps and waves all through your epoxy. So that is why everybody does super thin coats. The other reason is you don't want them to stick to whatever you've attached them to, or have the epoxy go in the other end so that you can't get the clicker back through again. Alright, I go into all of that in that other pen tutorial video. I'm assuming that you guys, if you're watching this, you've made pens before or you've watched my video. So coming off that assumption, I'm not going to go into too much detail on how to prep your pen, but we're just going to put epoxy. This is the whole way around now. I'm really just evening it out and making sure that I've got all of those rows of the little divots really well covered. See, I'm starting to drip, so I know that I've got too much. Put that back in there. There we go. Now I'm going to let this spin, and then once it's fully cured, I'm going to spray paint it matte white again. So the next time that I come back, because I never do any of my spray painting on camera, once I come back, the epoxy that we've just put on will have cured and I will have put another coat of spray paint on, and then we can continue the process. Okay guys, so this has had its one coat of epoxy. I only needed one coat. After that was fully cured, I went ahead and spray painted over it again, and now we're back to what would be a wood grain base. So we're going to go in with the same ginger that we used for our acoustic guitar glass, just because we're making a set, so we want it all to match. And I've also got a smaller danky old paintbrush. Okay, the big one I found, because of the curved surface is obviously a lot smaller on a pen, I found that using a smaller brush helps. But we are going to do exactly the same as what we did before, and that is get our lines going and then move our ink up and down so that we create that really nice wood grain effect. I am seriously pushing my luck with this ginger, guys. We're nearly empty, but I should have enough to do this pen. As long as I don't waste it. Okay, so it's the same back and forwards motion. You will have already practiced this making your glass. Making sure I get all around the ends as well. Realizing that I'm not in frame when I'm doing that. Sorry guys. It's a really weird angle to work at to do this. Oh no, we got dry spots. Okay, so I'm using a different spray paint on this as what I'd normally use. Normally for my wood grains, I will not go past my Aussie export in the matte white. I actually ran out. I've just done a major fundraiser for my son's cheerleading uniform, and we sold notebooks and resin pens. And I used up all my white spray paint doing a lot of the bases for them. So I am going in on this pen with my the new Dulux Duramax, if anybody's used that yet. And it's great for tumblers and base coats, but I'm finding it's not very cooperative when it comes to wood grains. So I think I will stick with my Aussie export where it comes to wood grains, but I'm just going to go over again. I don't like having spots on my wood grains. I like having it all consistent. So that it actually looks like wood. See, there's another spot. Okay, but it's the same backwards and forwards motion as what we did on the cup. So that you get, see if this will focus for us. There we go. We get that really nice, actually I'm going to turn that off. There we go. We get that really nice, easy wood grain. Okay, hold that up just a little bit more so it focuses. See that? We've got a gorgeous wood grain base. So again, just like we did with the cup, we're going to let this dry for 24 hours. Then I'm going to spray seal it, and then we'll be back with the next step. Alright guys, she has been spray sealed. So she is now ready for epoxy. Now because we are using a water slide design on this pen, I don't want the lines of the clear water slide to show, so I'm going to epoxy over my sealed ink first, then we're going to put the water slide on, and then we're going to finish off with epoxy. Okay. Now because it is a pen and not a cup or a tumbler or anything like that, I am using my Platinum Super Clear resin instead of my food safe resin. I use Platinum Super Clear. The link is down in the description if you're interested. It is my favorite casting resin to date. It is the easiest one that I've found in regards to not many bubbles, etc. And it's just a really thin epoxy to use. It is also, I found a lot better to use on pens than my food safe resin that I use. My food safe resin, obviously being a coating resin, is a little bit thicker anyway. This is nice and thin, and I can get nice thin coats on my pens. Okay, I'm not using a food safe resin because hopefully nobody is putting their pens in their mouths, but on my packaging for my pens I actually state, you know, this is a resin product, do not put it in your mouth. So I've covered my butt there. But we are going to use Platinum Super Clear on this pen tonight, as I do with all of my pens. Platinum Super Clear is a 2:1 ratio casting resin. So I've mixed up 7.5 mils tonight because I have other pens that I need to do final coats on as well. So that is 5 mil of part A and 2.5 mil of part B. It's this tiny little amount, right? So I'll use this to coat the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 pens. I usually work in lots of 5 because I've only got 5 of these arms at the moment. But I've got enough to do 5 pens and then finish off one of the marketing keychains that I'm currently making for a friend. She's my bow lady. If you ever hear me talk about my bow lady, that's Sorella from Pampered and Pretty Boutique Bows in Port Macquarie, New South Wales. She is my favourite person in the world in regards to bows, and I have 2 big bow holders full of bows that I never wear. I just think they're really pretty. So I'm going to put up, right now, I'm going to add the marketing keychain that I am talking about. It has an NFC tag in it. So although it's a really pretty glitter keychain, you actually can tap it to the back of your phone or any potential customer's phone, and it will take them straight to your Facebook page, your Instagram. You can program that chip however you like. So I'll put that little video to pop up at the top of your screen if you're interested in watching that. Otherwise, we're just going to talk quickly about my technique. Okay, I don't have any of the little silicone cones that you put in the end or anything like that, simply because I found that I don't need them. I've actually perfected my technique now where it's all in the flick of a wrist like this. Okay, so if you've already watched my pen tutorial where I did the 4 styles plus prep and packaging, I actually go into this a little bit more, but basically you want to smooth it all through the middle like this first. Once you have full coverage, you want to flick up as you get closer to the bottom, okay? And if you flick up like this as you go, you're not going to get any epoxy on what's actually holding it, okay? I do get little drips sometimes. I just clean it up with a baby wipe, but generally speaking, if I get to, as soon as you can feel that lip of the bottom of the pen on your fingertip through the glove, you flick up, okay? You shouldn't be using so much resin that you're going to go flicking resin all over behind you. This technique only works when you're doing thin coats, but you should only be doing thin coats on pens anyway. Right, when you get to this end, to stop the epoxy from going in, you want to do the same way, but you want to go down at an angle, okay? So you're coming all the way, you want to come down slightly to cover like that little lip around here, come down and then off to an angle like that, right? You don't want to come straight down because you're going to end up with epoxy in here. I might actually move that this way and I'll show you, right? So obviously I've already run epoxy the whole way around that little dip in bit where the clicker goes. So I want to pull my epoxy up and then down at an angle, right? I'm not going right down to here. It's the same wrist movement and I want to flick off at that angle, right? And that's how I make sure that I don't get any epoxy in my pen or on my holder. And she's done. Okay, so that is her first coat. I'm going to let her spin now overnight, let her fully cure. I can actually see a couple of little bubbles, so I'm just going to quickly hit it with my heat gun. There we go. I'm going to let her spin overnight now, and then we will be back to put the guitar face on. Alright guys, so putting the design on the pen. Now the first guitar that I ever did on a pen, I tried to use the same method that we did on the glass with the layering of the vinyl and stuff. Firstly, it looked ridiculous and it was really hard to do, especially with those tiny little strings. Secondly, that bit that fans out at the side on the guitar face in the black, once you resize the guitar face to where it didn't look stupid, that bit that fans out at the side actually wraps around to the other side of the pen. Looking at it face on, it doesn't look like a guitar, it just looked really ridiculous. So I gave up on that idea and decided we're just going to do water slides because water slides are so much easier. So I went looking for a guitar that doesn't have that little fanny outy bit on the side, okay? Excuse me. And I came across this SVG from Cutleaf SVG. She is on Etsy. Whoops. I will leave the description down in the comments for this file. It did cost me almost $6 in kangaroo coins. But well worth it because I'm going to make that back like the first pen that I sell. I've already made my money back on this design, so well worth investing. And if you really wanted to, you could use the same design and just do a water slide on the beer glass, right, and just have it all matching. Me personally, I like doing the 3 layers on the glass with the metallic vinyl for the strings. I just think it looks classy. But you could essentially pay your $6 and use that on the whole set. Okay, obviously it's saying add to basket because I'm not signed in, but yes, this is the file that I bought. And then we're going to come across again in Silhouette Studio. Here is my guitar. Now she looks a little bit squished, but I promise you once she goes on the pen, the pen looks like a guitar. Like, she does all right. So to get these measurements to fit on a pen, we have, that's supposed to be 4.3. Okay, so we want 4.3 high by 0.55 wide. All right, that's come down a little bit to 4.292. But yeah, my original measurements were 4.3 by 0.55. 0.5 just made it look too squished up. Obviously, because you're making the design longer but not wider, so that it fits on just the front face of the pen. You don't want it wrapping around so that people have to turn the pen to see the whole design. 0.5 just, I mean, I know this looks squishy, but the 0.5, it just made it look even worse. So I found that doing that extra little smidge, you can still see it from the face, which is what you're about to see, but it isn't as squished up. So again, that's 4.3 inches high by 0.55 inches wide, and that will fit your pen. Okay, so I have an inkjet printer. I will print mine and seal it, and then we will be back to put it on. Okay, so now that it's got its first coat of epoxy on it and it is fully cured, it is ready for the water slide, which you just saw me do. And I've printed it. I have an inkjet printer. I use an Epson XP970. In my opinion, it actually outdoes a lot of the entry-level laser printers that are available in regards to print quality, but it's still an inkjet. So I've printed this and I've sealed it twice, and obviously I've then cut it down, and we're ready to put it on our pen. So let's try and do this in. We're going to move this to the side just so I can keep this. Let's do it this way so that you guys can see. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to put this in the water. Wait for it to, I've just got it, look, I'll show you. I've just got it in my bowl of water. I'm just holding on to the end. I'm waiting until I get some slippage. Slippage? Is slippage a word? Some slippage. Far out. Some slippage happening. Slippage, Jesus Christ. Okay. As always, we're going to wet where we want the water slide to go. I think I'm going to put it over this bit because it went a little bit funny. So this will hopefully cover it. And making sure that it goes from the top in a nice straight line. God only knows what my neighbours are doing in the background there, guys. I'm sorry. They shouldn't be doing anything because it's raining. That needs to straighten up just a little. But there we go. So I'm just going to squidgy out. Obviously I'm not going to use my normal squidgy that I use for water slides because it's a pen. So I'm just going to squidgy out all of the excess water that might be trapped under there with my finger. And that, isn't that cute? Is our little acoustic pen to match our glass. So this will now get a final coat of epoxy on it, and then it will be ready to pass along. Okay, so now that our water slide is properly dried out, I also put a little bit of CC DIY quick coat over it just to seal it. Now, well, just stay on there. We're going to do our last coat of epoxy. So we're going to apply exactly the same, well, what we hope is the last coat. We're going to apply exactly the same way as we did the first time, where we apply all the epoxy in the middle of the pen, and then we're going to start spreading it out. Alright, so again with the flick of the wrists, once you get to the bottom of the pen, you flick your wrist up, and then when you get to the top of the pen, you do it down at an angle. Remember that? Exactly the same process. Just feeding the epoxy around to that top lip. And then I can finish spreading it out. that looks about done. So I'm gonna let her spin overnight. I'm filming at night time, so I'm gonna let her I'm gonna let her turn overnight, and then we'll be back tomorrow to put her together, and then the set will be finished. Alrighty, so here she is. She has got her final coat of epoxy on her now. She is done, and we're going to put her back together. So she goes back together the same way that we pulled her apart. We're going to put our little silver clicky bit in first. There we go. And then this little black bit. The ink goes in. Make sure your spring is attached to your ink cartridge, and then the end screws on. Okay, so we have our little acoustic guitar, please stay, pen, and let's see if we can get all of this in frame without it moving around. Ta-da! Nope, still not in frame. Ta-da! Our acoustic guitar set. So obviously this will take, when I put the epoxy on, this was yesterday. So 24 hours to touch cure, which is now. From here, it still needs another 7 days. So it's going to be about a week before I can list this to sell. But that is our little guitar set. What do you guys think? Please let me know if you enjoyed this kind of tutorial in the comments where I do themed creations. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't yet, please click that subscribe button. We are having a live giveaway on YouTube on the 30th of April 2021. You do have to be a subscriber to participate, so make sure you click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!